Welcome to the Research Works podcast, live from the European Academy of Childhood Disability Conference 2024 in Bruges, Belgium. Join us for interviews with keynote speakers, world-renowned researchers and clinicians, and behind-the-scenes stories from one of the great paediatric conferences in the world.
And now I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Adjunct Professor Mieke de Ketelaer from the Vlerick Business School. Hello and welcome. And did I say your name at least remotely close?
Absolutely, you did. And thanks for having me.
It is so wonderful to finally meet you. I've been so looking forward to speaking with you. Today, you'll be talking about your presidential keynote, which is titled, now wait for this, it's a great title, AI, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Absolutely.
Oh, I can't wait to get into this. So, I mean, it's wonderful that your keynote is on the last day to talk about this very important topic that is AI. It feels like it's just AI kind of, for the general population, at least, for people like me, it popped out of nowhere and it feels like it's just taking over. So to talk to someone like you is wonderful to put everything into context. So tell us a little bit about what AI is and what you plan on talking about in this keynote.
Yeah, that's a very good question to start with, because indeed, as an engineer, we love technology and we'd love to solve any problem with technology. Only what we don't like is making definitions. So we never made a definition of what is AI. That's already a start, you know.
Okay.
So, but let's just say for today, AI is just a system that has the ability to learn by itself.
Okay.
Just by looking at data. It doesn't need a programmer that programs line after line after line of code. It just looks at data, is able, based on statistics and maths, to see patterns in there and changes of patterns.
Okay.
So that's AI. It was like this 70 years ago. It's a very young academic discipline.
Right.
It's 70 years old.
Okay.
And it's still today the most used definition.
Wow, that's incredible. And so when it comes to what the good, the bad, and the ugly is, I mean, so many of us can probably already think about how it works into. It's probably sci-fi films that has made us think about, you know, the bad and the ugly and be careful. But where do you see AI currently fitting into our current landscape?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the original idea of AI was to help humans.
Okay.
It was never an idea, you know, to tackle humans or to put humans in question.
Yeah.
And the reason also why I studied it in 92 was because they promised me that this was a technology that was going to unleash some uncertainties in life. And especially when you talk about medical care, there are a lot of uncertainties.
Okay.
You want to see, you want to predict what's going to come out of certain, care program.
Yep.
You want to prevent certain things to happen. And this technology promised to do that.
Right.
And it did. And it still does.
Okay.
However, we've moved a little bit too fast with the technology and we left it in the hands of some bigger players that don't look at it in the complete picture. They really mainly look at it from a profit perspective.
Okay.
And they've made some shortcuts.
Okay.
And these are the things we need to fix, absolutely.
Right. Well, lots to talk about. So if we were to divide up now, I was thinking, which order should I do it in? Should I start with the good, the bad, or the ugly first? But I feel like we start with the good.
The good, yeah.
Let's start with good, and then it'll give us a very tempered view about what it is. So what do you see as the good in AI, particularly within the context of, should we talk about healthcare?
Yeah, exactly. Or even child disabilities.
Yeah, wonderful, yeah.
So, well, the good thing is, it can help us with certain tasks, both from the point of view of the caregiver as from the patient.
Okay.
So, for example, for the caregiver, you want a caregiver who chooses for this field, wants to spend as much time as possible with the patient.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of forms to be filled out and, things to type into a computer. Give this to AI. This is a dull task. Give this to AI. Image recognition, text recognition will do this much better.
Okay.
But additionally, there's also difficult tasks. Task as a caregiver where you want to have much more insights into the patient, where you want to actually have 24 hours of knowledge about what is happening with the patient. And it's simply not possible to be with every patient at every time.
Yeah.
And there, the combination of smart sensors with AI algorithms, they can give you this insight, so it helps you. It augments your knowledge about the patient just by using AI. And so that's very lovely. From a patient perspective, especially people with disabilities, either their brain is limited or their body has some limitations.
Yes.
There are also smart combination of technology and AI can help patients to have a much more comfortable life. And that's very nice.
Yeah. So those things are already in place. It sounds like, whilst we hear AI, it's like this big thing that's suddenly come, these things have already been in place.
But AI is not new. AI is 70 years old.
Yeah. So we can see a lot of efficiencies within healthcare.
Absolutely.
What do you think the adoption rate of things like that are in terms of, I love when you talked about forms, you know, no one wants to fill lots of forms. Where has that been adopted at the moment and how's that being used?
Well, we see it a lot of times adopted in, in processes, in hospitals. We see it. We see them, caregivers at home have applications, have apps on their mobile phones where they can adopt it, etc.
Okay.
So we see it really literally everywhere. But the thing is, it is indeed not new, and I think there's only it was in the hands of research labs or companies that really had an R&D department. And now, and that's the change in 2023, AI just sort of left this research lab, left the commercial space, and is now available to everybody. That's why we call general purpose AI.
Okay.
And so what we've seen with this new types of AI, because I didn't mention this, but we now have not only AI that analyzes data, we have also AI that generates data, generative AI.
Right.
And I think most common one is ChatGPT. Everybody talks about it.
Yes.
So, and what we see is that this ChatGPT suddenly opens up new tasks. I was talking about the dull task and the difficult task.
Yes.
ChatGPT suddenly is there to help us with what we call dolly tasks. And dolly tasks are tasks that for a human, they just take a lot of time. We can do them.
Yes.
I can summarize a report of 35 pages into 15 lines, but it takes me time.
Yes.
But let's give this to generative AI.
Yes, yes.
Or even, and that's the last one, the dear tasks where we want to, be available for our patient 24 hours, 7 days or 7 days. But caregivers are also human, so they have to sleep. But with the arrival of generative AI and, for example, the use of chatbots, we could, and I'm just really emphasizing, we could. Deliver a platform on which patients could be helped in a personalized way through the use of generative AI.
Yeah.
But there are the points where we need to put some attention on that.
Well, I feel like now that's a really good time to go, okay, there's the good. It sounds so amazing. And certainly there's a wealth of data there. So that's the good. What's the possibility of the bad there?
Well, the bad is that we have been taking some shortcuts because we only looked at the gut and we weren't critical enough to ourselves to actually understand the technology, because indeed the original dream was to replicate a human brain. To have systems that learn by themselves, and we've created something fantastic. But only definitely doesn't work like the human brain. It's advanced stats, it's maths, etc. And that means that things that are extremely easy for us as a human is difficult for AI, and things that are very easy for AI is for us difficult as a human. And this simple fact, we call this a Moravec's paradox. That's Moravec who pointed that out.
Okay.
This very simple fact, lesson 1.0 at University of AI, never made the translation in the outside world. So people started to think it is like the human brain, but it doesn't at all. It doesn't have common sense. It doesn't reason. It doesn't analyze images like we analyze it, etc. So we created something. It's fantastic.
Yes.
But sorry to say, but it's not a human brain.
There are still limitations. I mean, well, thank goodness for that, because you still want to have the human. Well, when we analyze data, I suppose we can look at the numbers, but we also can sense what's happening in the room. We can feel.
It's a reasoning.
That's
a reasoning
right.
layer.
Yeah.
So in fact, it's not that it's limited. It's just different. I prefer to use the word it's a different intelligence than just a limited intelligence.
Yeah.
Because it does things. For example, if you think about these sensors and you want to, have this analysis of your patient with all the sensors on all types of our bodies, wearables, all possible things. For us, when you get this data in, and it's a flow of data, a continuous flow of data, our brain can't grasp this. It's just too much. AI, if you have the compute power, it just quickly sees things in there.
Yeah.
So things where we are limited, AI plays with it, and where AI is limited, we play with it. So it is really a smart combination of the two that will be the future.
Yeah, sure. And when you said shortcuts earlier, I just want to touch back on that. What kind of shortcuts do you mean, and what do you?
Well, these systems, and that's a very important one for me. I'll just say a couple of shortcuts. For example, these systems are always trained by somebody somewhere on a certain context.
Okay.
But that means that they're very context specific. If you're going to integrate them in a context which is different, they're going to be out of sync. And I'm just going to give you an example. An example we all probably know as a wearable, Apple Watch. It also measures our heartbeat, etc. Well, it doesn't work that good on dark skin because the engineers were white.
Yeah.
When we think about, so this is a context, the engineers who created never thought about where is this going to be used, in which context it's going to be used, because you have to take the data from the context where it's going to be used. Or for example, when you take, for example, for speech technologies and speech therapists, you have these Google Assistants you can talk to. You can imagine to have this at the patient's home so he can talk to it.
Yeah.
Well, it's never trained on children voices. So a child asked, to sing a certain song, and it was Alexa. Alexa started to play porn. And just because the engineers never thought about the fact that this device was going to be in a room where there's potentially also children. And like this, you've got many examples.
Wow.
So context is everything in AI.
Yeah.
That's one point. And I think the second point is that, it doesn't have common sense. The outcome seems very logical.
Yeah.
Especially we have this when ChatGPT, we ask a question where we don't know the answer.
Yes.
But in fact, it has no idea what it's writing. It's just always spitting out the next answer. So it might look logical from a language perspective.
Yes.
However, from a content perspective, it might not make sense. So if you use this in speech or in therapy, you have to be aware of this.
And I love how you said that too, because I mean, a lot of us have dabbled onto ChatGPT. I certainly have gone on there to ask it questions about what I know in my area from a research perspective. Because I think, well, people will probably go on there and go, tell me the evidence about this. And it's obviously it receives its information from what is available, and what is available is not curated. Someone might not have gone through, because you could have a whole bunch of articles published on rubbish, but have all the right words in there. And if you type those questions in, you could get a result that's very skewed. I go, oh, wow, that's actually very different to what I know is in the articles literature, which is, I'm not sure if AI can scan through our journal articles that are, the ones that you've got to pay for
it
journals.
Depends.
So,
it depends, it's not, that's one of the things which might belong to the ugly part is that if we want to use these systems, we should get some transparency on what have they received as input. So at least we know, but we didn't get this transparency.
No, because otherwise you just trust what comes out, thinking it's everything. But the danger is you still need to actually apply some knowledge, some content knowledge, to
critical
that space.
Thinking and own knowledge. And a point which is very important for the conference today is the fact that people make relationships with technology. We like to be loved.
Yes.
And the more we're going to create technology that look and act like a human, the more people that feel lonely or people that, are a lot of the times by themselves, are going to create a relationship with it.
Yes.
And we actually have started to see this with the chatbots now, where patients start to collaborate with chatbots and they really start to get attached to them. But, the fact is that these chatbots don't act or have a conversation like we do as a human or like a therapist would do.
Yeah.
And so there is a form of addiction that's now started to appear between people, vulnerable people, and this technology. And that's where I call it the ugly part, because there's no regulation on AI today. And investors are really pushing towards, these type of new technologies, the chatbots. So there's a lot of investments going there.
Yes.
But nobody ever checked what about the manipulation? What about the addiction?
Yeah.
And I find it just a wrong way of putting things into the society. I mean, if you compare this to other medical devices, I mean, you've got to have a lot of, checks beforehand.
That's right. Yeah.
In AI, we can just dump anything on society, and as some of the bigger players say, we'll fix the problems as they come along, Mieke. I'm like, well, this is not the right attitude.
Right. Yeah. And is that what people refer to sometimes when they talk about AI? It's that the fear of it or the feel of it being sentient, like it's got that very, almost seems human-like responses. So you somehow get lured into that sense of trust that it sounds like me, but then if you ask it too many questions that might affect your medical decision-making process, that's the part that you're really worried about.
That's the part, but that's also because this is cocooned by the bigger players. They want you to, they want you to get the idea that we're getting closer to a higher level of intelligence, where I'm like, it's not. It's not. And you've got to realize that this is the game that's being played between the bigger players.
Yeah.
And only they use society to play that game. And this is unfair.
Yeah. Gosh, there's a lot to think about there. And I love that you've set it out in such a beautiful way to kind of go, okay, there are these beautiful positives. I've certainly used ChatGPT to put my data in there, all de-identified. And I think that's really important to make sure everything's de-identified, but just to check my data to make sure it's clean and I've got no missing spots, because that takes me hours to look through. But then I do the rest.
Yeah.
I think there's certain roles for it. So From your perspective now, as an expert in this area, where to from here? Like if you were to be the king of the world to kind of go, okay, this is what we should look at right now, what would that look like?
Well, the 2 points that we absolutely need to take into account. First of all, AI will stay. It's not that AI is suddenly going to disappear. I'm going to allow myself to compare it to the car, which was also technology. As long as it was in the hands of engineers, they were going to go for the profit. They didn't think about security, about seat belts, about driver's license. I'm talking about the 50s last century. And what happened? People loved the car, but they didn't like that they were losing friends and family due to accidents. So it was actually society that started to push back and say, we want this technology, but with a nicer framework around it.
Right.
Well, you could say that it's the same with AI. People love the technology, but it's important to get a framework, that security framework around it. But for this, and this is the difference with the car, is when you see car accidents, even if you're not in it, you almost feel the pain of the person who was in that car. It's very visible.
Yeah.
AI is a hidden technology, a complex hidden technology. So for me, to come back to my steps, the first step is society, people, caregivers, also patients need to at least understand to a certain level how this technology works.
Yeah.
Just like we use a microwave, do we know the physics? No, but we use this technology correctly.
Yes.
And once we know how it works and we understand these limitations I was talking about, then we can have a multidisciplinary debate on saying, well, what are we going to accept in society and what are we not going to accept? But this debate isn't happening today.
Okay, yeah. It's just gone too far forward.
It's gone too fast. It's in the hands of the engineers.
Yeah. So whilst we are hopefully waiting for some safety nets and regulations to come into place, and we don't know how long that might take for everyone to agree, we have some personal responsibilities in the meantime.
You have responsibilities, but also vendors of the applications have responsibilities. So they should create transparency. And there's some good, templates for this. It's called model cards. It's like, the leaflet you get with your medication, which explains from, hey, this is how we train the system. And these are potential risks that might appear. So at least Yeah. So this is one of the things. So it's transparency and responsibility.
Yeah.
And, you don't do this first by putting something on the market and then when things go wrong to fix it. You do this what we call the by design principle. So before you put it on the market, you create it, you test it, test it thoroughly, you do check with all types of disciplines around you, and then you put it on the market. So these are the two things that can be done. And then of course, all of us need to become more literate. We love our technology, but we don't like to read about it.
Yeah.
We've got to do that.
Yeah, that's right. And when you think about it, it's in every part of our life. The fact that I've got devices all around me, you've got it at your fingertips quite literally now. So we do have a responsibility to understand what this is all about too. It's important. Mieke, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I feel like it's a conversation we've been hoping and waiting to have because, it's just come about and we need to understand what it actually all means. And I'm just really grateful that you spent some time talking to us about that today.
It was lovely to be here.
Oh, lovely. Well, I hope all of the listeners really enjoyed that too, and lots of food for thought there. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all again really soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.